All right, good afternoon, Professor. How are you?
Okay, uh, it's been a bad week.
It has been a
In
bit.
fact,
You
it's
you
been
sound
two
you
bad
sound like you
weeks.
sound like President Obama when he appeared on Friday night after they apprehended the suspects. When he talked about the Boston troubles and the fertilizer plant explosion in Texas, he said it's been a bad week.
It's especially for those who don't know, for the non-optimists,
Yes,
the people
indeed,
who don't understand that everything's really getting better all the time.
it is.
Yeah,
Well, maybe we could start on that. How is everything getting better all the time?
well, because the rate of change is increasing still, and so new things are happening all the time, and
Uh-huh.
we tend to evaluate life in general in terms of what just happened instead of what might happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, I think that the um, incidence of what is generally called international terrorism, although some people argue over this term, but it seems to be the best generally accepted term. The incidents have been increasing generally since they started, but nevertheless, so's everything else increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an indication of the fact that we cannot really control everything, and we've got to get used to living in a world in which we can't control everything.
Well, you know what I found interesting. I mean, obviously, you're 100% correct in the inability to control everything, but there's a flip side to this globalization idea, and that is for approximately 17 hours, the authorities were able to use these means of communications to essentially keep 1.1 million people in their homes and not let them come out of their houses and in Boston during the search for the two suspects. And there was no hue and cry against it. There were no protests. There were no clamoring from people who were stuck in their homes. Everybody understood why they had to stay in their homes. So these same means of communication that allow people to better communicate and transfer ideas on a horizontal level can also be, I suppose, and in this case it was completely justifiable, can also be used by authorities to spread warnings. But I suspect then the next step could be there's a potential here for like demagogic Joseph Goebbels like use of these facilities to be able to exert a stronger centralized authority if in fact that was something that somebody wanted to pursue.
Well, I wondered about that, and I haven't seen any detailed commentary on it. If really everybody really did stay indoors for that length of time, that's really quite amazing.
I think they did.
But I wonder how much longer it would have worked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we have a tendency, I think, generally, if there's a real crisis that everybody agrees is a crisis, and it's being managed by public authorities that we think probably know what they're doing, then we'll do what we're told for a limited period. But I think impatience with that sort of thing starts to rise fairly soon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it really was something because you have to figure I was putting myself in that position because, for example, in New Jersey here last year during Hurricane Sandy, we were without electricity for 11 days and nights. And it occurred to me, what if I was in Boston and I had no food in my house, no food in the refrigerator, and I needed to go to the ATM machine and et cetera, all of these needs I needed to do, and I couldn't go out of the house. I mean, I was in, and if I wanted to go out, there would have been no stores open. I mean, everything was like stalled. It was a
You,
complete freeze frame.
you'd be un-American.
Well, not only would it be un-American, but it might have been worse. I could have been arrested by the police or something.
I wonder. Yes. Well, but you introduced this because of the idea of a respect for authority and the fact that maybe people will do what they're told
Hmm.
for a period of time as a result of the ability of authority to contact everybody in new ways.
Hmm.
And that's a very interesting idea, but I think that it works two ways. And so in a very few situations, such as the Boston situation, where everybody wanted the public authorities to succeed quickly, they all did what they were told. But I can't see it lasting long, and it makes it possible for everybody to communicate quickly. And in the past, in totalitarian states, it's always been top-down communication, not bilateral communication.
Well, let me just posit this to you then. We've always talked about how the communication on the horizontal level is effectively superseding the institutions that are nominally in control of the people at the horizontal level. But if Google, for example, can figure out the preferences, the buying preferences, and God knows what else of individuals simply by their internet searches, do you not think it's plausible to think that somewhere as a result of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Group or something or other in the United States government, that the United States government, and I don't want to sound like one of the black helicopter crowd, but do you not think that somebody might have done similar work to be able to monitor the populace of this country and be able to find what disturbing trends are and whatever they may be in terms of law enforcement purposes or governmental ideas or policies?
I think that sort of thing probably is possible in terms of trends.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't tell what everybody's going to do, but you can work out what many people are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
After all, that Google does. Google's learning enough to be able to make money.
Yeah, yeah. And I already know the Centers for Disease Control uses Google, for example, to monitor the spread of the flu in the winter. They check how many hits are entered relating to flu symptoms, flu treatment, et cetera, et cetera. And they're able to quite clearly mark out the path of the infection throughout the country. And it's always a couple of days ahead of the visits to the emergency rooms or the doctors.
That's very interesting. And yes, the development of these social media makes it possible for much more information to be gathered and used about what people are thinking, what they're doing, but it's never complete information.
No, it's not. It's not. But it perhaps I mean, again, and I'm going to stop this. I don't want to seem like a paranoid conspirator or anything, anti-conspiracy person. But if you combine the power with the knowledge that Google, for example, has, and marry it to tax return information, financial information, military service record, divorce record, et cetera, all of the information that the government has. I mean, it could be an unbelievably potent kind of synergy that deep hidden in the government somewhere could be the ability to really track what's going on in the population. And again, we've always talked of this globalization as going one way. But I'm just wondering if we're missing that. Well, wait a minute. There is an organization at the top that almost has unlimited power. I mean, why have we not looked at that?
I think you have a very bright future.
Well, I don't know about that. I'll probably get a knock on my door by the time I finish this broadcast after this.
But I still think that it will never be total information, but there'll be increasing amounts of information that will alert us to trends and what possibilities are, but there'll still be a lot of individual decision making to be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there'll always be a dividing line between information government has and information the government that is in the private sector, I imagine, unless the political system changes in ways that we don't expect it to change.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the Israeli claim that's now been verified by the U.S. Secretary of Defense that Syria has in fact used sarin gas on a limited basis against its own people?
Well, I think that we've entered a new stage of the Syrian conflict, and I think I have difficulty believing this, but it seems to me that Assad is being very clever. Because the other news is that the proportion of rebels or the opposition who are Islamist in affiliation is increasing. And So it looks as though he understands that the US is much less likely to support the rebels the more Islamist they become,
Mm-hmm.
and that gives him more freedom to do what he thinks it's necessary to do.
Mm-hmm.
We also don't know to what extent Russia is supporting him.
Mm-hmm.
We know Iran is supporting him, but though we don't know exactly how, because since we created the Shia Republic of Iraq between Iran and Syria, it's possible for all sorts of things to move between Syria and
Yeah.
Iran that wouldn't have been possible before.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that as of that Israeli general's announcement a couple of days ago, we've entered a new stage, and the outlook is not good because it means that if it does in fact finish up being a Islamist versus international clash,
Mm-hmm.
then that's going to involve the whole Middle East.
Yeah, it will, won't it? Right, because it'll also spark things in Egypt.
Egypt and Saudi Arabia and even
Mm-hmm.
places in the Gulf like Qatar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think, as usual, every new thing that happens, the world gets more interesting.
Right, right.
It's the scale is advancing.
And there's really no way to move now in this because Obama made the use of chemical weapons such a bright line event that, I mean, what does he do now?
Regret what he said before, I'm sure,
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
because it puts him in the situation of having to deal with the Israelis again and work out how to appear not to have gone back on what he had said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, another factor is what Turkey is going to think, because Turkey is very much on the side of the opposition, I think, but very concerned about the Kurds.
Very concerned about the Kurds.
And
Right.
so that makes the whole situation extremely complicated because the Iraqi government is concerned about the Kurds as well.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so is the Iranian government, for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you speculate a little bit going further to the east, the situation in Pakistan right now? What do you think General Musharraf hoped to gain when he appeared there in Rawalpindi?
I think he thought that he had enough support um, to be able to get on the ballot and get enough votes to get into the Majlis and play a part, even if not a leading part, in what happens politically in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and if I'm right, then I think he's really misguided.
Yes.
It really surprises me. But I assume that he has a lot of contacts in the country, and especially in the army. And it's clear that the army has been involved since he got there, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not supporting him to the extent that he was hoping they would.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Right.
I mean, the army is still the most national institution in the country.
Oh yes, yes. It maintains a separate economy and
And
everything else as well. Yeah.
the PPP had nowhere near the same sort of following that it had before. Um, Baluchistan is ready to secede.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, Pakistan is in a terrible mess.
Now let's go a tiny bit further to the east. Now supposedly there's a half of a division of Chinese troops about 10 kilometers into the disputed area of Kashmir that the Indians are practically like begging the Chinese to get them out because they're about at the end of their patience. I mean, have you been reading about that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
But I know that those border problems are not going away.
No, I mean they virtually came to war in 1962.
Yeah, yeah. And even though they stood down and didn't turn it into a war, nevertheless, or at least they stopped any threat of fighting. Nevertheless, the claims are still very serious on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it would be easy for an objective bystander to adjudicate between the two sides, because after all, they're both really based on colonialist claims, one of the British and one of the Chinese.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, one could argue, of course, that if Tibet belongs to China, then China has a right to these territories. And if India is the successor state of the British Empire, then, but still, I mean, that is a good basis for the two to get together and arbitrate,
Right, right.
which they have been ready to do. To go back to the terrorism situation, I think that the only way that we're going to deal with terrorism of this type in the foreseeable future is for each country to pay much more attention, not to finding people in other countries, but to looking after security in their own country.
Right, right.
And that, I know we have public authorities that do this to some extent at the moment, but I think a lot more could be done.
Well, I think a lot more can be done, and I think that the curtain is going to begin to be lifted on the electronic measures that we were talking about at the beginning, because I know they have them, and even just this week, the CIA said that they had specifically requested that the FBI put the older brother in Boston on a watch list, but for some reason the FBI didn't follow through, and that was after the FBI had interviewed the older brother at the request of the Russians. The CIA, as of yet, has officially never had any contact with the older brother. So how they knew about him to request to put him on the watch list has not yet been revealed.
Is the CIA part of the same Homeland Security organization that Bush launched?
Yeah, they have a seat at that table. Correct.
So but from the beginning there were problems in communication between the CIA and the FBI, so they haven't been solved yet.
Evidently not. And of course, the CIA is somewhat limited because of their charter. They're not legally permitted to operate in the U.S. So I guess they can cry and scream as much as they want, but in the end, the FBI decides what to do. So it was pretty fast how they had isolated those images after just 48 hours. I was very impressed with that.
It certainly was.
Yeah. Well, all right, Brian. Thank you very much for your time. We'll, barring technical problems, we'll convene again in a week.
Let's keep a close eye on the news in the meantime.
Indeed.